The stagecoach lurched violently over another rut in the dusty road, and Rebecca Barrett pressed her gloved hand against the window frame to steady herself, her heart hammering so hard she thought it might burst through her corset. Through the grimy glass, she watched the endless expanse of Oklahoma Territory stretch before her like a vast, unforgiving ocean of prairie grass and red earth, and every mile that carried her farther from civilization felt like another nail in the coffin of her old life. It was 1893, and she had left everything she knew in Philadelphia to become the bride of a rancher she had never met, a man whose letters had been kind but whose face remained a mystery. And now, as the wooden buildings of Enid finally appeared on the horizon, she wondered if she had made the most foolish decision of her 22 years. The driver shouted something unintelligible from his perch, and the horses slowed their pace as they entered the main street of the frontier town. Rebecca swallowed hard against the dust that seemed to coat her throat, her fingers trembling as she smoothed down the traveling dress that had once been a soft blue but was now gray with trail dirt. She had imagined this moment 1,000 times during the 2-week journey from Pennsylvania, rehearsing what she would say when she met Owen Carver, the man who would become her husband within days of her arrival. His letters had painted pictures of a prosperous ranch with cattle and horses, a sturdy house with real glass windows, and a life that would be challenging but rewarding. What she saw through the stagecoach window looked like the edge of the world, rough and wild and utterly terrifying. The coach came to a stop in front of a weathered building with a sign that read General Store and Post Office, and Rebecca took a shaky breath before the door swung open. A man in dusty clothes and a broad-brimmed hat offered his hand to help her down, and she accepted it gratefully, her legs unsteady after so many hours of travel. The late afternoon sun beat down with an intensity she had never experienced back east, and she raised her other hand to shield her eyes as she looked around the crowded street. Cowboys on horseback moved past with barely a glance in her direction, and a wagon loaded with supplies creaked by, its driver spitting tobacco juice into the dirt. Everything smelled of horses and dust, and something sharp she could not identify, and her stomach turned with nerves and exhaustion. "Miss Barrett?" a deep voice asked, and she turned to find a man standing a few feet away, hat in his hands. He was tall, well over 6 feet, with broad shoulders that strained against his work shirt and sun-bronzed skin that spoke of years spent outdoors. Dark hair fell across his forehead, and when his gray eyes met hers, she saw something gentle there despite the roughness of his appearance. "I am Owen Carver." Rebecca felt her breath catch as she took in the sight of the man she had agreed to marry. He was younger than she had expected, perhaps 28 or 30, and handsome in a rugged way that made her cheeks flush. "Mr. Carver," she managed, dropping into a small curtsy that felt absurdly formal given their surroundings. "I am pleased to finally meet you." Owen stepped closer, and she noticed he moved with a kind of careful grace, as though he was aware of his size and did not want to startle her. "The pleasure is mine, Miss Barrett. I hope the journey was not too difficult." His voice had a warm quality that matched the kindness in his letters, and some of the tension in her shoulders eased slightly. "It was long," she admitted, "but I am here now, and that is what matters." He smiled then, a slow spread of warmth across his weathered face that made the corners of his eyes crinkle. "That it is. Let me get your trunk and we will head out to the ranch. It is about an hour's ride, but I brought the wagon so you would be comfortable." As Owen moved to retrieve her belongings from the stagecoach, Rebecca watched him with a mixture of relief and lingering anxiety. He seemed kind, which was more than she had dared hope for, but kindness would not protect her from the harsh realities of this frontier life. She had read stories of women who came west and faced hardships beyond imagining, of those who perished from disease or accident or the simple brutality of the land itself. Her hands twisted together in front of her, and she forced herself to take deep, steady breaths. Owen returned with her trunk balanced easily on one shoulder, and he gestured toward a sturdy wagon hitched to 2 bay horses. "This way, Miss Barrett. I know you must be tired." She followed him, acutely aware of the eyes watching them from various points along the street. A woman in a faded calico dress stood in the doorway of what appeared to be a boarding house, her expression curious. 2 men outside the saloon had stopped their conversation to stare, and Rebecca felt heat creep up her neck. She was an oddity here, a stranger in fine Eastern clothes, and she had never felt more out of place in her life. Owen helped her onto the wagon seat with a steadying hand, then secured her trunk in the back before climbing up beside her. The seat was barely wide enough for 2, and she found herself pressed close to his solid warmth as he took up the reins. "Hold on," he said softly, and clicked his tongue to set the horses moving. They left Enid behind, heading out onto a rutted track that wound through the prairie, and Rebecca gripped the edge of the seat as the wagon bounced over uneven ground. The landscape stretched endlessly in all directions, broken only by occasional stands of scrubby trees and the distant shapes of hills. The sky overhead was impossibly vast, a brilliant blue that seemed to go on forever, and she felt small and vulnerable beneath its enormity. "Are you frightened?" Owen asked after several minutes of silence, and she turned to find him watching her with concern. Rebecca considered lying, then decided honesty would serve her better. "Yes," she said simply. "Everything is so different from what I knew, so wild and empty." He nodded, his expression thoughtful. "I understand. It takes some getting used to, and I would be a fool to tell you otherwise, but I want you to know something, Miss Barrett." He paused, and when he spoke again, his voice was firm with conviction. "I will keep you safe always. That is a promise I make to you now before we are even married. Whatever comes, whatever challenges this land throws at us, I will protect you with everything I have." The sincerity in his words struck something deep in her chest, and Rebecca felt tears prick at her eyes. She blinked them back, not wanting to appear weak, but she nodded. "Thank you, Mr. Carver. That means more than you know." "Owen," he said gently. "Please call me Owen. We are to be husband and wife soon enough, and I would like us to be comfortable with each other." "Then you must call me Rebecca." His smile returned, warmer this time. "Rebecca, it suits you." They traveled on as the sun began its descent toward the western horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold. Owen pointed out landmarks along the way, explaining where his property began, and showing her the boundaries that marked his ranch. He spoke of his cattle herd, nearly 500 head now, and the 3 ranch hands who helped him manage the spread. He described the house his father had built 15 years earlier, when this land was even wilder, before Oklahoma Territory had been open to settlement, and how he had worked to improve it over the years since his parents had passed. Rebecca listened, trying to absorb all the information while fighting the exhaustion that pulled at her. The rhythmic motion of the wagon and the warmth of the late summer evening conspired to make her eyelids heavy, and several times she caught herself starting to doze. "Not much farther now," Owen said, and she forced herself alert to see buildings emerging from the twilight ahead. A large barn stood dark against the sky, and beyond it, a house with lamplight glowing from its windows. As they drew closer, she could make out more details. A sturdy 2-story structure with a wide porch, corrals holding horses, and several smaller outbuildings. It was more substantial than she had expected, and some of her worry eased. Owen brought the wagon to a stop in front of the house, and before Rebecca could move, he had jumped down and come around to help her. His hands were firm on her waist as he lifted her to the ground, and she swayed slightly when her feet touched solid earth. "Easy," he murmured. "You have been traveling for too long. Come inside, and I will have Clara fix you something to eat." "Clara?" Rebecca asked, following him up the porch steps. "My housekeeper. She is a widow from town who comes out 3 times a week to cook and clean. I asked her to stay tonight so you would have another woman here, someone to help you settle in. I thought it might be less awkward that way." Rebecca felt a rush of gratitude for his thoughtfulness. "That was very kind of you." The interior of the house surprised her with its comfort. The main room held a large stone fireplace, solid furniture that showed craftsmanship, and rugs that softened the plank floors. A kitchen area occupied one end, where a woman with graying hair and a gentle face was stirring something on the stove. She looked up as they entered, and her face broke into a welcoming smile. "You must be Miss Barrett," she said, wiping her hands on her apron as she approached. "I am Clara Morton. Welcome to the Carver Ranch." "Thank you, Mrs. Morton. Please call me Rebecca." "Then you must call me Clara." "Now, you look like you are about to fall over, dear. Sit yourself down at the table and I will get you some supper. Owen, bring in her trunk and show her to the guest room, would you?" Owen obeyed with the air of a man accustomed to Clara's gentle bossiness, and Rebecca sank gratefully into a chair at the large wooden table. Clara set a bowl of beef stew in front of her, along with thick slices of bread still warm from the oven, and Rebecca realized she was ravenous. She ate quickly, barely tasting the food, while Clara kept up a comfortable stream of conversation about the ranch and the surrounding area. When Owen returned, he sat across from Rebecca with his own bowl of stew. "I thought we might have the wedding in 3 days," he said carefully. "That would give you time to rest and adjust a bit. The preacher comes through Enid every Sunday, and I spoke with him when I went to town this morning. He agreed to perform the ceremony if that suits you. 3 days. Rebecca's hand trembled slightly as she lifted her spoon. In 3 days, she would be married to this man she barely knew, bound to him and to this wild land forever. But what choice did she have? She had used the last of her savings for the train ticket west, had left behind a city where opportunities for unmarried women were vanishing as quickly as the factory jobs that had sustained her after her parents died. This was her chance at a new life, at security, and perhaps even happiness. She could not let fear steal that from her. "That suits me well," she said, meeting Owen's eyes. 3 days will be sufficient." He looked relieved. "Good. Clara has agreed to help you prepare, and we will have a small gathering here at the ranch afterward. Nothing fancy, just a few neighbors and the hands." "That sounds lovely." After supper, Clara showed Rebecca to a bedroom on the 2nd floor. It was simply furnished but clean, with a real bed covered in quilts and a washstand in the corner. Her trunk sat at the foot of the bed, and someone had filled the pitcher with fresh water. "Owen's room is at the other end of the hall," Clara said quietly. "You will have your privacy until the wedding. He is a good man, Rebecca. One of the best I have known. You need not be afraid of him." "I am not afraid of him," Rebecca said, and realized it was true. Whatever fears she harbored, they were not of Owen himself. "I am afraid of everything else." Clara patted her hand. "That is honest, at least. The frontier is no easy place, especially for someone not raised to it. But you are young and you look strong enough. You will learn, and Owen will help you. He would not have sent for a bride if he did not want a true partner." After Clara left, Rebecca changed into her nightgown and crawled beneath the quilts. The bed was surprisingly comfortable, and the house was quiet except for the distant sound of cattle lowing and the whisper of wind across the prairie. She lay awake for a long time, staring at the ceiling and thinking about the strange turn her life had taken. 6 months ago, she had been sewing buttons in a Philadelphia factory, sharing a cramped boarding house room with 3 other girls. Now she was on the edge of Oklahoma territory, about to marry a rancher and begin a life she could barely imagine. Sleep finally claimed her, deep and dreamless, and when she woke, sunlight was streaming through the window. For a moment she forgot where she was, then memory returned in a rush. She sat up, noting that someone had left a basin of warm water and fresh towels on the washstand. Grateful, she performed her morning ablutions and dressed in a simple day dress, then made her way downstairs. Owen was at the table with a cup of coffee, and he rose when she entered. "Good morning. I hope you slept well." "Better than I have in weeks," she admitted. "What time is it?" "Nearly 8. I let you sleep because you needed the rest. Clara will be here soon to fix breakfast, but I can make you coffee now if you would like." "I would, thank you." As Owen poured coffee into a sturdy mug, Rebecca moved to the window and looked out at the ranch in daylight. The land rolled away in gentle swells covered in grass that rippled like water in the morning breeze. Cattle grazed in the distance, dark shapes against the gold and green prairie, and she could see men on horseback moving among them. The barn and outbuildings looked well maintained, and everything spoke of hard work and careful management. "It is beautiful," she said softly, surprising herself. "I did not expect it to be beautiful." Owen came to stand beside her, holding out the coffee mug. "Most people only see the harshness at first. It takes time to see past that to what lies beneath. I am glad you can see it already." She accepted the coffee and sipped it, finding it strong and hot and exactly what she needed. "Tell me about your ranch hands. You mentioned 3 of them." "Yes. Marcus Hill has been with me for 5 years now. He is a good man, steady and reliable. Then there are the younger 2, Jack Connolly and Sam Brennan. They have been here about a year. All 3 live in the bunkhouse behind the barn. They are respectful men, and they know you are to be my wife. You need not worry about any trouble from them." Rebecca nodded, relieved. She had heard stories of ranches where women were scarce and not always treated with respect. "May I meet them?" "Of course. After breakfast, I will take you around and show you everything. You should know your way around the place, understand how things work." Clara arrived shortly after, bustling in with a basket of eggs and greetings for them both. She prepared a breakfast of eggs, bacon, and biscuits that filled the house with wonderful smells, and the 3 of them sat down to eat together. The older woman asked Rebecca questions about her journey and her life in Philadelphia, listening with genuine interest to her answers. Owen added his own questions, and Rebecca found herself relaxing as they talked, the conversation flowing more naturally than she had expected. After breakfast, Owen kept his promise and took her on a tour of the ranch. They started with the barn, a massive structure that held stalls for horses, storage for hay and grain, and a tack room lined with saddles and bridles. The smell of horses and leather filled the space, and Rebecca found it not unpleasant. Several horses poked their heads over stall doors, curious about the visitor, and Owen introduced her to his favorite, a black gelding named Midnight. "Can you ride?" he asked, stroking the horse's nose. "A little. I learned when I was younger, but it has been years. We will need to get you comfortable in the saddle again. It is the best way to get around out here, and I want you to be able to move freely. I will teach you, if you are willing." "I am willing to learn anything that will help me manage here," Rebecca said firmly. They moved on to meet the ranch hands, who were working in one of the corrals. Marcus turned out to be a weathered man in his 40s with kind eyes and a quiet demeanor. Jack and Sam were both in their early 20s, sunburned and lean, and they doffed their hats respectfully when Owen introduced Rebecca. She greeted them politely, aware of their curious stares but grateful when they quickly returned to their work. Owen showed her the chicken coop, where 24 hens scratched and clucked, and explained that gathering eggs would likely become one of her daily tasks. He pointed out the smokehouse, the root cellar, and the well that provided their water. Everything was laid out with practical efficiency, and Rebecca tried to memorize it all, knowing she would need to navigate this place on her own soon enough. As they walked back toward the house, Owen paused and turned to face her. "I know this is overwhelming, Rebecca. You have been thrown into a completely new world with barely any time to adjust, but I want you to know that I do not expect you to manage everything perfectly right away. We will learn together, and I will help you however I can." His sincerity touched her deeply, and Rebecca felt something shift in her chest. This man was trying so hard to make her feel welcome, to ease her fears, and she owed him the same effort. "Thank you, Owen. I promise I will do my best to be a good wife to you." "I have no doubts about that," he said quietly. The next 2 days passed in a blur of activity and adjustment. Clara helped Rebecca unpack her trunk and organize her few belongings, offering advice about frontier life and what to expect. She taught Rebecca how to cook on the wood stove, how to make bread from scratch, and how to preserve food for the long winter months ahead. Rebecca absorbed it all like a sponge, determined to prove she could handle this life. Owen spent time with her each day, patient and encouraging as he taught her to ride again. He saddled a gentle mare named Rosie and led them on easy rides around the ranch property, never pushing her beyond her comfort but gradually building her confidence. She discovered she enjoyed the freedom of being on horseback, the way it allowed her to see the land from a different perspective. The prairie that had seemed so empty and hostile began to reveal its subtle beauties: wildflowers hidden in the grass, birds that swooped and sang, the play of light and shadow as clouds moved across the sky. At night, Rebecca lay in her bed and thought about the wedding that was coming. She still barely knew Owen, but everything she learned about him reassured her. He was thoughtful and hardworking, respectful of her boundaries, and genuinely concerned for her well-being. She could build a life with such a man, could grow to care for him deeply. Perhaps it would not be the romantic love she had once dreamed of as a girl, but it would be real and solid and lasting. The morning of the wedding dawned clear and warm, and Rebecca woke with butterflies rioting in her stomach. Clara arrived early to help her prepare, bringing a dress she had altered from her own daughter's wedding gown years before. It was simple but beautiful white cotton with lace at the collar and cuffs, and when Rebecca put it on, she hardly recognized herself in the small mirror. "You look lovely," Clara said, tears shining in her eyes. "Owen is a lucky man." The ceremony was held in the main room of the house, with the preacher standing before the fireplace and a small gathering of neighbors and ranch hands forming a semicircle to witness the vows. Rebecca's hands shook as she stood beside Owen, but when he took her hand in his, warm and steady, some of her nervousness faded. She looked up into his gray eyes and saw something there that made her breath catch, not just kindness, but a tender hope that mirrored her own. The preacher led them through the traditional vows, and Rebecca's voice was surprisingly steady as she promised to love, honor, and cherish this man who had become her husband. Owen's voice was deep and sure as he made his own promises, and when the preacher pronounced them married, he squeezed her hand gently before leaning down to kiss her cheek, a brief touch that still made her blush. The gathering afterward was simple but joyful. Clara and some of the neighbor women had prepared food, and there was music from a fiddle player who lived on a nearby homestead. Rebecca found herself swept into conversations with women who welcomed her warmly, offering advice and friendship. She began to understand that community on the frontier was vital, that neighbors might be miles apart, but they relied on each other in ways city dwellers never did. As the sun set and the guests began to depart, Rebecca felt exhaustion creeping over her again. The excitement and emotion of the day had drained her, and she was grateful when Clara gave her a final hug and whispered encouragement before leaving with her husband. The ranch hands had returned to the bunkhouse, and suddenly she was alone with Owen, truly alone for the first time as husband and wife. He seemed to sense her nervousness because he said gently, "You must be tired. It has been a long day." "Yes," she admitted. "I am." "Then you should rest." "I will sleep downstairs tonight, give you time to adjust. There is no rush, Rebecca. We have the rest of our lives." His consideration brought tears to her eyes. "You are very kind, Owen. I am just trying to be the husband you deserve." He moved closer, reaching out to tuck a stray curl behind her ear with a tenderness that made her heart flutter. "I know you did not come here for love, that this was a practical arrangement, but I hope that in time we might find something deeper. I would like that very much." Rebecca felt something warm unfold in her chest, a feeling she was not quite ready to name, but that filled her with unexpected hope. "I would like that too." She went upstairs alone, changed into her nightgown, and slid beneath the quilts. The house was quiet, and she could hear the soft sounds of Owen moving around downstairs. He was giving her space, respecting her need to adjust, and she loved him a little for it. The thought startled her, but she did not push it away. Perhaps this was how love grew on the frontier, not in grand romantic gestures, but in daily kindness and steady devotion. The next weeks settled into a rhythm. Rebecca learned the routines of ranch life, rising early to prepare breakfast for Owen and the hands, tending to the chickens, and the kitchen garden Clara had shown her, helping with endless chores that kept the household running. It was exhausting work, harder than anything she had done in the city, but there was a satisfaction in it too. She was building something here, creating a home, and that sense of purpose sustained her. Owen was patient with her mistakes and generous with his praise when she succeeded. He continued her riding lessons, and soon she was confident enough to ride out across the ranch on her own. He showed her how to read the weather, how to spot signs of trouble in the herd, how to mend fences and tend to injured cattle. She was not strong enough for the heaviest work, but she learned to handle a rifle and became a decent shot, which pleased Owen greatly. "You need to be able to protect yourself if I am not around," he said seriously after a particularly good practice session. "This land can be dangerous, and I will not always be here to keep you safe." "You promised you would keep me safe always," she reminded him with a small smile. "And I will do everything in my power to keep that promise, but it eases my mind to know you can defend yourself if necessary." As autumn approached and the days grew shorter, Rebecca found herself thinking less about Philadelphia and more about the future here on the ranch. She and Owen had grown comfortable with each other, their conversations deepening as they shared stories of their pasts and hopes for what lay ahead. He had moved back upstairs to his own room after a week, but sometimes Rebecca lay awake and wished he would knock on her door, wished they could take the next step in their marriage. She was not afraid of him anymore, not afraid of the intimacy that should exist between husband and wife. In fact, she found herself wanting it, wanting him in a way that both thrilled and embarrassed her. One evening in late September, after supper had been cleared and they sat together by the fire, Owen reached over and took her hand. "Rebecca, may I ask you something?" "Of course." "Are you happy here? Truly happy?" She considered the question carefully, wanting to give him an honest answer. "I am happier than I expected to be," she said slowly. "When I first arrived, I was terrified. Everything was so foreign and overwhelming, but now I cannot imagine being anywhere else." This place has become home, and you have become dear to me." His eyes darkened with emotion, and he lifted her hand to his lips, pressing a kiss to her knuckles. "You have become dear to me as well, more than dear. I love you, Rebecca. I know it may be too soon to say such things, but I cannot keep it inside anymore. You have brought light and warmth to this house, to my life, and I am grateful every day that you answered my letter." Rebecca felt tears spill down her cheeks, but they were tears of joy. "I love you too, Owen. I did not expect to, but I do. So very much." He rose from his chair and pulled her to her feet, wrapping his arms around her and holding her close. She pressed her face against his chest, feeling the steady beat of his heart, and knew she was exactly where she was meant to be. When he tilted her face up and kissed her, really kissed her, she kissed him back with all the feeling that had been building inside her for weeks. It was sweet and passionate and full of promise, and when he finally pulled back, both of them were breathing hard. "Come upstairs with me," he whispered against her hair. "Be my wife in truth." "Yes," she breathed, and let him lead her to his room. That night marked a new beginning for them both, a deepening of the bond they had been forging since the day she arrived. Rebecca discovered that the intimacy between husband and wife was not something to fear, but something beautiful when built on trust and love. Owen was gentle and patient, making sure she felt safe and cherished, and when she finally fell asleep in his arms, she knew she would never sleep alone again. The months that followed were the happiest Rebecca had ever known. Winter came to the Oklahoma Territory with surprising cold, and she learned to appreciate the thick walls of the house and the warmth of the fireplace. She and Owen worked together to prepare the ranch for the harsh weather, laying in supplies and making sure the cattle had adequate shelter. The hands moved into the barn loft during the coldest weeks, and Rebecca made sure they had hot meals and dry clothes. Christmas was a revelation, a celebration unlike any she had experienced in the city. The neighbors gathered at the Carver Ranch for a feast that lasted well into the night, and Rebecca felt embraced by the community in a way she never had before. These people looked out for each other, helped each other survive, and she was proud to be counted among them. In February, Rebecca realized her monthly courses had not come. She said nothing to Owen at first, wanting to be certain, but when another month passed, she knew. She was carrying his child, and the knowledge filled her with wonder and a touch of fear. Childbirth on the frontier was dangerous, and many women did not survive it. But when she finally told Owen, his joy was so complete that her fears faded into the background. "We are going to have a baby," he said, wonder in his voice as he placed his hand on her still flat stomach. "A son or daughter, our child. Are you pleased?" she asked, though she could see the answer in his face. Pleased does not begin to cover it. "I am thrilled, awed, terrified, and grateful all at once. We are going to be parents, Rebecca. What could be better than that?" The pregnancy was not easy. Morning sickness plagued her for weeks, and as her belly grew, so did her discomfort. But Owen was attentive to her every need, and Clara visited regularly to check on her and offer advice. The neighbor women shared their own experiences and brought baby clothes they had saved, and Rebecca felt supported in a way she had not anticipated. In early October, as the prairie grass turned gold and the air cooled with the promise of autumn, Rebecca's labor began. Clara and 2 other women came to help, sending Owen outside with the men while they attended to her. The hours that followed were the most difficult of her life, pain unlike anything she had imagined, but she clung to the encouragement of the women around her and pushed through it. When she finally heard the first cry of her newborn, she wept with relief and joy. "A boy," Clara announced, wrapping the squalling infant in a soft blanket. "A healthy, strong boy." They allowed Owen inside then, and Rebecca would never forget the expression on his face when he saw his son for the first time. He approached the bed with reverent steps, eyes wide, and when Clara placed the baby in his arms, tears streamed down his cheeks. "He is perfect," Owen whispered. "Rebecca, you have given me the most precious gift." "We made him together," she said, exhausted but happy. "What should we name him?" They had discussed names over the months, and Owen did not hesitate. "Oliver, after my father, if that suits you." "Oliver Carver," Rebecca said, testing the name. "It suits him perfectly." The weeks after Oliver's birth were a whirlwind of sleepless nights and constant feeding, but Rebecca had never been happier. She marveled at the tiny human they had created, at his perfect fingers and toes, the way he scrunched up his face when he cried. Owen was a devoted father, rising in the night to bring the baby to Rebecca for feeding, changing diapers without complaint, and spending hours simply holding his son and staring at him in wonder. As Oliver grew from infant to baby to toddler, the ranch prospered. Owen expanded the herd with Rebecca's full support, and they hired another ranch hand to help with the increased work. Rebecca proved herself capable of managing the household accounts, and she began keeping chickens and selling eggs in town for extra income. She also started a small vegetable garden that provided fresh produce through the summer months. When Oliver was 2 years old, Rebecca discovered she was pregnant again. This time the pregnancy was easier, and in the spring of 1897, she delivered a daughter they named Ruth after Rebecca's mother. Owen was equally besotted with his daughter, and watching him with both children made Rebecca's heart swell with love. He was firm but gentle, teaching Oliver to ride and helping him learn about the ranch while also singing lullabies to Ruth and dancing with her in the kitchen. The years rolled past in a rhythm of seasons and work, joy and occasional hardship. There were droughts that tested them and winters that seemed endless, but they faced everything together and emerged stronger. Rebecca became known in the community as a capable woman who could be relied upon in times of trouble, and she took pride in that reputation. She was no longer the terrified Eastern girl who had stepped off the stagecoach in Enid. She was a frontier woman, a rancher's wife, and she had earned her place here. When Oliver turned 6, Owen began teaching him more serious ranch work, and the boy took to it with enthusiasm. He adored his father and wanted nothing more than to be just like him. Ruth, meanwhile, showed signs of her mother's practical nature, following Rebecca around and mimicking her tasks. The house rang with laughter and the sounds of childhood, and Rebecca often paused in her work to simply appreciate the life they had built. One evening in the summer of 1899, Rebecca and Owen sat on the porch after the children had been put to bed. The sunset painted the sky in brilliant shades of orange and pink, and the prairie stretched away in peaceful beauty. Owen reached over and took her hand, lacing their fingers together as he had done countless times before. "You remember when you first arrived?" he asked. "How frightened you were," Rebecca smiled. "How could I forget? I thought I had made the worst mistake of my life. Everything terrified me. And now I cannot imagine my life any other way. This place, these people, our children, and most of all you kept your promise, Owen. You said you would keep me safe always, and you have. Not just physically, but emotionally too. You have given me a home and a family, and a love I never dreamed I would find." Owen lifted her hand to his lips and kissed it tenderly. "You saved me too, you know. Before you came, I was just going through the motions, running the ranch but not really living. You brought joy and purpose to everything. You are my heart, Rebecca. You and our children are everything to me." They sat in comfortable silence as the stars began to appear, and Rebecca felt a deep contentment settle over her. She had come to the frontier as a frightened mail-order bride, but she had found something far more valuable than security. She had found love, true and lasting, with a man who cherished her, and a life that challenged and fulfilled her in equal measure. The wildness of the land no longer frightened her because she had learned to see its beauty, and she knew that with Owen by her side, she could face anything. Over the following years, the ranch continued to thrive. Owen's hard work and Rebecca's careful management made them increasingly prosperous, and they were able to improve the house and expand their operations. They hired more hands as the herd grew, and eventually Marcus took on the role of foreman, freeing Owen to focus on the bigger picture of running the business. Rebecca established a small library in town, donating books from her own collection and encouraging other families to do the same. She believed education was vital, especially for frontier children, and she made sure Oliver and Ruth had access to books and learning. In 1901, when Rebecca was 30 years old, she gave birth to twin boys, much to everyone's surprise. The labor was difficult and dangerous, and for a while Owen feared he might lose her. But Rebecca was strong, tougher than anyone had given her credit for, and she fought through it. The twins, named Nathaniel and Nicholas, were healthy and loud, and they kept the entire household on their toes. Oliver and Ruth adored their baby brothers and helped care for them, and the house was constantly filled with noise and activity. The frontier was changing by then. Oklahoma Territory was moving toward statehood, and more settlers arrived every year. Enid grew from a rough frontier town into a proper community with schools, churches, and businesses. The wildness was being tamed, and while part of Rebecca mourned the passing of that era, she also appreciated the safety and stability it brought for her children. Owen's reputation as a fair and successful rancher spread, and he was often consulted by newer settlers seeking advice. He was generous with his knowledge, remembering how difficult those early years had been, and Rebecca was proud of the respect he commanded. Together, they became pillars of the community, known for their kindness and their strong marriage. The children grew healthy and strong, shaped by the land and their parents' values. Oliver showed every sign of becoming as fine a rancher as his father, while Ruth surprised them all with her head for numbers, and declared she wanted to manage the business side of the ranch when she was older. The twins were still young, but they were adventurous and full of mischief, constantly testing boundaries and keeping their parents young. On their 10th wedding anniversary in 1903, Owen surprised Rebecca by taking her on a trip to Kansas City. It was the first time either of them had left the ranch for more than a day trip to town, and Clara agreed to stay with the children. The journey by train was an adventure, and Rebecca marveled at how much easier travel had become compared to her original trip west. They stayed in a real hotel, ate in restaurants, and attended a theater performance, but what Rebecca treasured most was the uninterrupted time with her husband. 10 years, Owen said one night as they walked through the city streets. Sometimes it feels like yesterday that you stepped off that stagecoach, and sometimes it feels like you have been with me forever. Both are true, Rebecca said, leaning into his warmth. That frightened girl feels like a different person, but she also led me to this life to you. I would not change a single thing. Not even the hard parts, the droughts and the difficult winters, especially not those. They taught us we could survive anything together. They made us stronger. Owen stopped walking and pulled her into his arms, right there on the busy street. I love you, Rebecca Carver. I will love you until my last breath and beyond. And I love you, Owen, always and forever. They returned to the ranch renewed and ready to face whatever came next. The years continued to unfold with their mixture of joy and challenge. There were losses. Clara passed away peacefully in her sleep in 1905, and Rebecca grieved deeply for the woman who had been her first friend on the frontier. Marcus retired in 1907, though he stayed on the ranch in a small house Owen built for him, offering advice and enjoying a well-earned rest. But there were triumphs too. Oliver won first prize at the county fair for his calf. Ruth graduated at the top of her class from the new school in Enid, and the twins learned to ride before they were 5. In 1907, Oklahoma achieved statehood, and the celebration in Enid lasted for days. Rebecca and Owen took the whole family to witness the festivities, and Rebecca felt a swell of pride that she had been part of this transformation. She had helped build something here, had contributed to turning wild territory into a proper state. It was a legacy she could be proud of. As the children moved toward adolescence and young adulthood, Rebecca and Owen began to think about the future of the ranch. Oliver had never wavered in his desire to take over one day, and Ruth was becoming indispensable in managing the accounts and contracts. The twins were still young, but they were already showing interest in different aspects of ranch life. The Carver legacy would continue, shaped by the children Rebecca and Owen had raised with love and care. On a warm evening in the spring of 1910, nearly 17 years after Rebecca had first arrived in Enid, she and Owen sat on the same porch where they had shared so many conversations over the years. The children were inside, Oliver helping the twins with their schoolwork while Ruth practiced the piano Owen had bought for her birthday. The sounds of their family life drifted through the open windows, a symphony of normalcy and love. "Are you happy, Rebecca?" Owen asked, echoing the question he had posed so many years before. She turned to look at him, seeing the silver threading through his dark hair and the lines that life had etched on his handsome face. She knew she looked different too, shaped by the years and the children and the sun. But when she looked at him, she still saw the man who had promised to keep her safe always, who had kept that promise in ways both large and small, who had loved her through everything. "I am more than happy," she said. "I am content. I am fulfilled. I am exactly where I belong." Owen smiled and pulled her close, and Rebecca rested her head on his shoulder. The prairie stretched away from their porch, that vast expanse that had once terrified her but now felt like an old friend. The sky above was painted in the colors of sunset, and somewhere in the distance, cattle lowed as they settled for the night. It was an ordinary evening on an Oklahoma ranch, but to Rebecca, it was perfect. She had come to the frontier as a mail-order bride, terrified and alone, not knowing what her future held. She had found a husband who became the love of her life, a land that tested and shaped her, and a community that embraced her. She had built a home and raised a family, and she had discovered strengths she never knew she possessed. The Wild West had seemed like the end of the world when she first arrived, but it had become the center of her entire universe. "I kept my promise," Owen murmured against her hair. "I kept you safe." "You did more than that," Rebecca replied. "You gave me a life worth living, a love worth having, and a future worth building. You gave me everything." As darkness fell, and the stars emerged one by one in the vast Oklahoma sky, Rebecca Carver knew with absolute certainty that her decision to answer that rancher's letter had been the best choice she had ever made. The frontier had been frightening, yes, but it had also been the place where she found herself, her purpose, and her forever home. The years ahead would bring more changes, of course. Oliver would eventually marry a sweet girl from a neighboring ranch, and they would build a house on Carver land to start their own family. Ruth would indeed take over managing the business side of things, proving herself as sharp as any man in negotiations and contracts. The twins would find their own paths, one staying on the ranch and the other pursuing education and eventually returning as the town doctor. More grandchildren would come, filling the house with new generations of laughter and love. But through it all, Rebecca and Owen would remain the steady center, their love the foundation upon which everything else was built. They would grow old together on the land they had worked so hard to cultivate, watching sunsets and counting stars, their hands still finding each other across whatever distance separated them. On quiet evenings, they would sit on that same porch and remember the frightened young woman who had stepped off the stagecoach and the lonely rancher who had promised to keep her safe always, marveling at how two strangers could build something so beautiful. Rebecca would never forget the terror she had felt that first day in Enid, but she would also never regret pushing past that fear. The frontier had demanded everything from her, had stripped away the softness and shown her what she was truly made of. It had given her a strength she had not known she possessed, and a love that sustained her through every challenge. She had come west looking for security and found something far more precious: a home, a family, and a man whose promise had proven true every single day of their lives together. In the end, that was the story Rebecca would tell her grandchildren when they asked how she came to Oklahoma. She would speak of fear conquered and love discovered, of harsh land made beautiful through hard work and dedication. She would tell them about the rancher who had promised to keep her safe and had given her so much more than safety. She would explain that sometimes the most frightening decisions led to the greatest rewards, and that love could grow in the most unexpected places. And when those grandchildren would look at their grandmother, weathered by years and sun, but still standing strong, still looking at their grandfather with eyes that held decades of devotion, they would understand. They would see the proof that promises kept and love nurtured could withstand anything, even the wildness of the frontier. Rebecca Barrett had traveled west as a mail-order bride and had become Rebecca Carver, frontier woman, rancher's wife, mother and grandmother. She had been terrified of the frontier, but the rancher had said he would keep her safe always, and he had done exactly that. More importantly, they had kept each other safe, had built a life together that was worth every moment of fear, every hardship endured, every challenge overcome. As she sat on that porch in the twilight of her life, Owen's hand warm in hers and the sounds of their family filling the air around them, Rebecca knew that she had found what every person searches for: a place to belong, a love that endures, and a life well lived. The Wild West had become home, and home had become everything she had ever needed or wanted. She had found her forever, and it was more beautiful than she had ever dared to dream.